Welcome everyone, I'm Alyssa. In this series, I'm cooking delicious, versatile, and easy to make recipes. And today, I'll be sharing my recipe for crepes. For these crepes, I'm gonna be stuffing them with Nice's bacon, asparagus, and mushrooms. I'm also gonna add some delicious creamy cheese. First thing you're always gonna wanna do is pre-make your batter. And that's really important so that all the flour can soak up all of the moisture that you're gonna add, and so you have a really nice, silky smooth batter. I have all of my ingredients laid out. I'm gonna start with my eggs. I always crack an egg on a flat surface. You get less dripping and it's easier for you to control where you break the egg. We're gonna add to this about a 3/4 cup of water and a cup of whole milk. And you can substitute dairy-free milk. The ingredients are very flexible. You're just going for a certain consistency of the overall batter, which you can always fix a little later on. I'm just gonna turn on my stove to about a low or medium low, just enough to melt the butter. I'll add 3 tablespoons. So I'll whisk all of this together, break up the eggs, got a teaspoon of salt, and then I'm using whole wheat flour. I love the sweet flavor of the whole wheat flour, but you can certainly use all-purpose flour. You might just need to do a little bit of adjusting on the liquid ingredients. And then you don't want your butter to get too hot, but once it's completely melted, you're just gonna whisk it in. So that way it won't warm any part of your batter. And that's all there is to it for this crepe batter. So it's gonna go into the fridge and I'll be making up the ingredients for the filling. So I grabbed my bacon out of the fridge. It's always better to cut your bacon and get it into the pan while it's still cold. It's just much easier to work with. So for this, I'm gonna use about a half a pack, about 8 ounces. I'm just gonna turn on my pan to about a medium low. You don't want it to get too hot. I'm just gonna take each strip and cut it into a nice wide 1/2-inch piece. So these pieces can end up being a little bit larger. And as soon as your pan has just been warming for about a minute, you can go ahead and put the bacon in. Again, you don't want it to get too hot. If the bottom of your pan starts to get browned a little bit, just go ahead and lower the heat. While I'm keeping an eye on the bacon, I'm just going to slice up my other vegetables. So I have some nice shiitake mushrooms. These are good because they have a little bit more pronounced flavor. You can certainly use whatever kinds of mushrooms that you want. The bacon's cooking at a really good rate. I've already rendered out a lot of the fat within the bacon and it's gonna get crisp. So now for cutting up my asparagus, I'm gonna do a bit of a bias cut, which just means that you're angling your knife. That way you can get longer pieces. Once you've cut into it, you can really start to see a little depth of color. So there's a little bit more visual appeal to that. And I do start about 1.5 inches on the spear of asparagus because this end is a bit more chewy and fibrous. So you can just start a little bit further up and not use that part. This bacon is looking just about perfect. I'm gonna start removing it from the pan with a slotted spoon so I can keep all of the bacon fat in there to cook the vegetables in. So you get this really nice, consistent crisping of the bacon if you keep that temperature a little lower. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my mushrooms into the pan and let those crisp. I like to do those first because they're gonna take a little longer to cook, and the asparagus, I only need to cook that until it gets nice and bright green, which will only take a minute. My heat is on low because there's quite a bit of browning from the bacon. And a lot of that will clear up from the moisture from the mushrooms, but it's still a good idea to not be on too high of a heat. And I'm gonna pinch in some salt. That salt's gonna help to bring the moisture of the mushrooms out. Now is a good time to add the asparagus. You can see how the mushrooms pretty much cook down to almost half of what you started with. Go ahead with some salt and pepper, and only cook the asparagus until it's nice and bright green and you see the pop of color. So you want them still al dente. And I have a nice flat sheet tray to transfer them to so they'll cool a lot faster. Especially with green vegetables like this, they can start to brown very quickly, so you wanna get them cooled as quickly as possible. So I'm just going to lay them out and spread them out on the pan. So now that I've got all of my ingredients ready to go, I'm gonna go ahead and get that crepe batter out of the fridge. So as long as it's had 30 minutes in the fridge, it really will absorb most of the liquid and become just a lot more velvety, and you can really see the consistency and kind of how it drips off of the ladle here. I always like to have just a little bit more water. It is really cold, so it can be a little bit thicker right out of the fridge. So I'm just gonna splash in a little bit of water, but it should just spill right off the ladle just like that. The skillet that I'm using is a cast iron, but it's nice and flat, almost like a comal that you would use to cook tortillas on. But it's a great shape, and I prefer using this for my crepes, but anything flat and wide will do the trick for this. I've seen a lot of people use non-stick pans, so that's another option. I'm gonna heat my pan on about medium for quite a few minutes. I want this to heat so that it's well distributed and nice and hot, so that I can go quickly through making all of these crepes. Again, if you're working with butter, work faster. The more that it cooks in the pan, the more browning it's gonna have, and we wanna be able to add the butter, let it melt, and then put the crepe batter right into the pan. You also wanna have a towel or something wrapped around your pan so you can easily pick it up. So the weight of your pan shouldn't be something that you can't really pick up, because it's all about how you can move the crepe batter in the pan. And as that's starting to cook, you're just gonna move the skillet around to spread it into a nice, even, thin crepe. So having a nice thin spatula is really helpful, especially if you have a heavy pan. It's hard to just get that flip going. So once it's nice and set and the batter doesn't look like it's raw, you can go ahead and flip it over. You get these nice little air pockets, and it adds just a really good color. They don't need nearly as long on the other side as they do on the first side. So as soon as they kind of hit the side after about 10 or 20 seconds, you can go ahead and take them out and just start to layer them onto a sheet tray or a plate. And I'll go ahead with my next one. So my crepes are all ready, they're all cooked, and now I'm gonna work on filling them. So I've got some Brie cheese. I like a nice, melty, flavorful cheese, so Brie is perfect. You could go for a goat cheese or just another sort of triple cream cheese. And Brie, much like the bacon, is something that it's ideal to cut when it's nice and cold. So I'm just gonna lay these out and fill them up one by one, and place them on a sheet tray. Being that you can add just about anything to crepes, I really like that we're using the bacon when it's nice and crispy, because we've got a lot of soft ingredients, so it just adds some crunch, some texture, and a really good balance with the salt and the smokiness. And I like to just give this kind of a double fold, lay that on a sheet tray. And I have my oven set to broil, so I can put these in for just a moment to melt the cheese, get a little extra browning on the crepe itself, but they won't take long at all. Right. These were only in the oven for about 3-4 minutes. The texture is perfect, so keep a good eye on them. And I'm gonna plate them up. They smell so good. I really love this combination, and the cheese just kind of puts it over. And I'm gonna finish this portion off with a little bit of Parmesan cheese. But you could add lots of different things, a little bit of preserves or jam, some freshly cut herbs, or even just a sunny side up egg would make it great if you're eating this for brunch. These are delicious with the fresh vegetables and that perfectly crisp Nice's bacon. So I hope you'll give them a try. Enjoy them from my kitchen indoors.